Will teaching English in Vietnam even be an option in 2024, 2025? Let's talk about what's going on, what the actual change of the rules going to do for teachers, and if you're considering getting a job out here, what steps you should actually take, what qualifications you need, and how to find the right job. Since I came back to Vietnam, I've been to Hanoi, and I've went down to Saigon, and I've got to talk to some old friends, and I've met new teachers, and the biggest concern that comes up is technology. In Vietnam, people typically have 2 or 3 phones, including their kids. Are Vietnamese going to start using this tech to actually learn English instead of paying for all these centers? The short answer is no. During the pandemic, a lot of schools, not mentioning names, but a lot of schools started going online to teach because schools had to shut down due to government regulations. Vietnamese don't want to learn English online. They want to be at the school, and it's kind of a two-sided coin kind of a thing. One, like I said before, it's considered more wealthy. It is part of the rich people. This is more of a culture idea, and a lot of parents just want to get the kids out of the house. Like that's kind of the big one. And one thing that I saw, the kids wouldn't focus. They were actually doing worse. The parents were getting frustrated because the parents had to give their computers and phones and iPads to the kids during this class time. A lot of Vietnamese parents consider English centers as like a daycare that has the benefit of English on the side. So getting the kids out of the house is actually a big part of it. If you've lived in China or Vietnam, you know that the grandparents watch the kid while the parents work, or they're at the bar getting drunk, or they're at a coffee shop looking at TikTok all day. That's just the culture of Vietnam. So for them to have to watch their own kids is already kind of like breaking the social norms. Online technology to learn English, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon on a massive scale. Now, I do want to say though, this doesn't mean it's not a possibility that might get forced into, because you have to understand a lot of schools actually sell grades, they sell marks. And this was actually a big issue that happened with one school. I wish I could name it because their name will give you a good idea of how powerful this school is. But what was going on was the actual grades of students were going down like 60-70%. And it's very hard to give fake grades, which is a very common practice in Vietnam, when the parents are watching their kids fail the test live. And this is something I've seen on a lot of Facebook groups. A lot of them are starting to question, like, why is my son or daughter going to school for 8-9 years and they can't speak English at all? Another one is the grades. A lot of parents have been asking about how does my student have, my child have 8 or 9 out of 10, but when they go in for their university exam with the English IELTS, they get like a 2.0 or a 3.0. And that's a big part of what's going on, is these kids are learning English for 5 or 10 years. The parents are paying for it, and it's not cheap. I mean, we're talking like $500-$700 a month sometimes, and these kids don't speak any English. Over a magnitude of 10 to 12 years, and all they can say is like, hello, what's your name, where you from, how old are you? And nobody can understand them. These schools know they're giving out fake grades. Like, it's not a secret. I mean, it's wild to me. Like, when I see Vietnamese parents send their kids to these schools knowing that their kids are getting fake grades, they're proud of their kids getting high marks, and then they give other kids fake grades. Like, it's just a big circle jerk of like fakeage. So will this ever happen? I don't think anytime soon. Parents are still going to want their kids babysat, and there's still going to be adults that have this New Year's resolution of, I'm going to learn English in 5 or 10 days kind of a thing. And these centers are still going to be there for them. And we'll talk more about the centers in a bit. So as a lot of you guys know, Vietnam has already removed the whole English program. And when I say they removed the program, it doesn't mean they're deleting like English centers. It just means that their government schools no longer require the final English exam in the high school program. So when they graduate high school, they have to take 3 separate like mandated tests, being like math, literature, there's a few others, and then they have like 4 or 5 electives. English used to be required, now it's an elective. So think of it as it got demoted. And universities have already started to adapt to this. Saigon and Hanoi have both started creating English, or not English programs, but university programs for students to join starting 2025 that don't even require English to join these. Typically in Vietnam, you have to have an IELTS to join the university, to join any program. This is now being removed. Because I mean, what is the university going to do? Fight the government on this rule? They have to adapt. And the crazy thing, I was looking at Hanoi's university programs. They're actually cheaper than the English counterpart. So this is just more motivation for parents not to care if their kids learn English, because it's cheaper not to go to these English centers or learn in a government school. And it's cheaper in a university to not even care about it. The ones that are going to be learning English really have a purpose for it at this point, which is going to remove millions of students from the whole bubble of learning. But we'll talk more about the time frame in a minute. So typically English teachers have two options: teaching in a public government school, or they're teaching in an English center. And what's been going on with the public schools is they've started to remove their native and non-native teachers, as in like they're firing them without notice, and putting all the kids into just single classrooms with a Vietnamese teacher that typically doesn't speak English very well, if at all, and just extorts the parents for money to give them a good grade. And if you are on Facebook teaching groups, you're probably already been seeing this for the last couple months, where teachers are just posting like angrily, like, hey, I just got fired from my school. They didn't tell me why. Some schools aren't even paying the teachers their final salary. They're just like, hey, English is done, bye. Now again, this is just for the public government schools. English centers themselves, though, they're not doing too bad. With most English centers, the decrease in students, from what I found online, this is actually quite hard information to find sometimes, but it's down about 20%. But I found last year, the year before, English centers drop rate was about 7 to 9%. So it's doubled, but it is also the first quarter of the year, meaning that the stats that I got might not even be accurate, or the kid just took a break from school for a month. And English centers, there's not really a start point. You can kind of join whenever you want. A lot of the teachers that are being removed are non-natives. If you've been to Vietnam, you hear about this talk a lot. What's been happening in the public sector is native and non-native, white or black, Asian, whatever. And when I say Asian, like Filipino teachers, they're all being removed the same, like equally. If they work in a public school and the school decides we're getting rid of English, they're getting rid of it. And the problem with that is the schools are talking to the parents saying, hey, next semester, you're going to join the English class, but we don't have a native teacher anymore. And this is where a lot of parents, I feel, are going to kind of drop out of it. And with this problem I want to talk about, kind of brings in this crazy influx of teachers that's going to happen. So all these public teachers are leaving. And looking at the Zalo and Facebook groups today, what I noticed is a lot of the teachers being fired, they're not leaving Vietnam. They're now applying in English centers. Now they're asking agents to help them find a job in English centers. So there is now becoming a very sloping influx of English teachers, native and non, that are trying to get jobs at English centers. And we can see where that's an issue. Right now, to get a job in Vietnam is becoming very competitive. And to add all these extra teachers in the mix that are experienced, that do probably have good CVs, that probably have a work permit, is going to make it very hard for a lot of new teachers. And this leads to the public schools getting rid of English, or at least not making it mandatory, and it's going to be very limited very fast. And the issue with this is typically at a public school, the parents have to pay a few extra bucks. I'm just saying a few extra bucks, but it's usually more for English, and they typically pay for the whole year up front. So the parents might be aware of this already, but they've already paid for the English program, right? So this isn't really affecting a lot so far. The reason that native teachers and non-native teachers are being removed is because the schools already got the money from the parents, and they don't want to pay for a native teacher anymore because they don't really have to. They can just throw a Vietnamese teacher in there and not say anything, and they actually make more money because they're not paying a native teacher no more. You know what I mean? And this is where I've seen a lot of English centers start to get very creative with their marketing. 2 or 3 English centers I've seen already have already talked about the universities getting rid of the English program. Well, not getting rid of it, but having a non-English version of it, and putting that in parents' face, saying, hey, your kids don't have to learn English no more in high school, blah, blah. But if they don't, they're just going to get a shitty version of their university degree, because you have to have English and graduate the university to get the real job. You see what I'm saying? So I've seen a few English centers actually talking about this, which I think is extremely good marketing, because they're shooting out the problem and they're giving it a solution, which I think is a beautiful marketing plan. And that's what they're doing with that. Another thing that I'm starting to see is English centers are starting to advert for more discounts and bigger promises and stuff like that. Like typically, like if you guys have ever taught in Vietnam, you know these kids learn English for like 8 to 10, 12 years, and they can't speak it. And many English centers now, not giving out names, are starting to promise fluency within 3 to 6 months. And they're pretty much saying you'll be able to speak this level of English, like IELTS 5.5, within like 6 months, or you can retake the class for half off, stuff like that, which I think is beautiful marketing, because they know these kids aren't going to pass, because they know kids don't do homework. They know the parents don't help their kids with their education. They know these kids are going to fail, and they know that they're just going to have the kids going in through these programs at 50% off for however long, which is still income for the school. Like, beautiful marketing, but it is really taking advantage of the poor results Vietnam has when it comes to English. So for the time being, I feel everything is fine in Vietnam as being a teacher, as long as you can teach English, as long as you have a good CV, as long as you have the basic skills and you can sell yourself at these interviews, you're gonna be okay. The interview is actually one of the hardest parts. It used to be easy. You just showed up and you're just like, hey, I speak English, and like, you're hired. There's a work permit, there's a class, go do something. Now it's getting more competitive because, again, there's so many teachers. So now these schools can interview like 10 or 15 teachers and be like, well, we like these 2 guys. Let's take them, and the other ones, whatever. Like, they don't even call you if they don't want to hire you. They just kind of ignore you or block you on Chinese New Year 2025 in February, or like TET, whatever you want to call it, is where things are going to change. This is when school is going to start back up after Chinese New Year's over. Parents are going to have to repay for the English program in public and government schools, because there's going to be a point when English centers are going to be battling with each other to keep students, because you can't have a classroom with 4 students and hire an American or Canadian or African teacher. The balance sheets don't work. There's going to be a lot of heavy discounts, marketing, stuff like that. I've already seen a few English centers start offering like dance programs in English. There's actually a school that was near where I was living where they're offering American football and basketball classes in English. So they are getting creative with it. Again, mad respect to Vietnam for the creativity part, which is a rarity. But I just feel like 2025, they're going to start battling. All these smaller schools are going to suffer, and really for 2 reasons. One, when they're closed for the 2 or 3 weeks during TET, they're not going to have any surplus of money. These large schools are going to have like bank full of money, like reserved money. These smaller centers aren't going to have that. And when they reopen, it's going to be, can we get students or not? And if they can't, they're going to have to shut down. They're not going to have the money for marketing to compete with the bigger schools. And then these bigger schools are just going to need more students to pay for these American, Canadian, or African teachers, right? And like I said before, with all the public schools closing, there's going to be a massive surplus of native and non-native teachers. So you have to have an A game, man. Like, if you're already out here and you can teach, that's awesome. That means you're building a CV with a long history, or you at least have a long contract with your job. So this won't affect you so much. If you're planning to come out here, you have to know what we know as teachers that have been doing it for however long. Check out my link below, my Gumroad site. I've written a ton of books that cover activities, lesson plans. I got free books on there. I got books that you can buy it on there. All these books will teach you everything you need to know to come out here and crush it, to crush your demo lesson, how to get your perfect CV put together, where to find the best job for your position, because that's kind of a question. A lot of people come out here to Saigon or Hanoi, and they just find an agent, get effed over by the agent, and get a shitty job, and then fired in like 3 weeks because they found out the agent lied about the job. This happens way more than people want to talk about. It's no longer you just walk this interview and you're a white guy or a black dude, and you're just like, hey, I speak English, and you're hired. That stuff is done. You have to now prove yourself as a teacher. Still need to have your 4-year degree, and you need your TEFL. If you don't have a TEFL, check the link below, 50% off. You get the whole thing done online while you're back home in your home country. It doesn't expire, and it works all throughout Southeast Asia. It's the same one I use. So make sure you have that. Do not come to Vietnam without a TEFL. It only takes like 6 hours to do the whole program. Make sure you have your degree, get your documents put together, make sure everything is good, come out here. And if you have any more questions about what's required or what it's like to teach out here, check out my videos. I've done a ton of videos on teaching in Vietnam. And if Vietnam's not where you want to be, I've talked about Cambodia, I've talked about Laos, and I've talked about Thailand, where you can teach English as well. And these are all adequate options where you can make enough money to live comfortably out here and still enjoy it. And plus, if you do work in Cambodia or Laos or Thailand, you can still come visit Vietnam. So you have those options. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching. Till then, I will see you again.